This movie might just be the greatest possession trial movie ever done. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Enter the CineVault. So today I wanted to go all the way back to 2005 and talk about one of the movies that I hold as one of my favorite possession movies that's ever been made, and that is The Exorcism of Emily Rose. So our basic story of this movie is about a 19-year-old young girl from a small town coming from a deeply religious family, and she's going away to college for the first time. She's never been to the big city. She's really never left home. So this is her first kind of outing into like a big social public atmosphere. When she goes away to college, she ends up getting possessed by 6 demons. So she leaves college and comes back home, and then this is where the parents decide it's not medical. They've kind of exhausted all of their options when it comes to like anything medical, affecting her condition. And they decide they need to contact their parish and get a priest in and do some type of exorcism on Emily. Sadly, the exorcism fails and Emily ends up dying at the end of the exorcism. And what happens from here is it gets to local authorities and they decide that they have to now put the priest responsible for the exorcism on trial. So they decide they have to put the priest on trial and they charge him with negligent homicide. So you have this interesting mix of a demonic possession movie on a young girl who is very religious, combined with a courtroom drama. And normally I wouldn't think that those two topics would really mesh together all that well, but this movie pulls them off in a near perfect fashion. I've never seen a movie before that takes both of these topics and meshes them together in near perfection. So let's go back to more of the beginning of the movie. We have Emily leaving for college. Like I mentioned, it was her first time away from home, never really been in a big social atmosphere before. So this is all brand new to her. And it starts off, she's a little bit awkward. She's socially awkward because she's never really interacted with people on this level. And she starts to come out of her shell a little bit. And this is where we see the possession begin. What I really like about this movie is the fact that we see most of the stages of possession from very early up until it gets worse and worse and worse. And eventually it's so bad she has to go back home. And then she does make it back home. And that's where the family starts looking into medical issues. And could this be epilepsy or something else? They exhaust all of their medical options. And then they decide that it's time to bring in a priest because they think this is something much worse. So the possession at home gets so bad that the family decides they need to call their parish. They really have to think now, like, I think we need to bring in a priest and do an exorcism because they've exhausted all their options and they really don't know what else to do. So they finally contact the church. They get the exorcism approved. And then the last thing that they ever thought is that their daughter would die in the middle of this exorcism. One thing I really like that they do is they really showcase the entire process of the exorcism. It takes place out in the barn outside of their house because they do live on like a farmland. At one point, she runs out of the house and into the barn, and that's where the final exorcism takes place. And it gets really bad, and sadly, Emily dies. So once Emily dies, that's when the authorities figure, okay, we have to charge somebody with this because they couldn't put two and two together and think that this was actually an exorcism gone wrong. They just kind of blame the priest with negligent homicide. And that's where the movie takes a turn and goes from demonic possession movie to courtroom drama. Like I mentioned earlier, you wouldn't think that that would really pair together all that well, but they do an excellent balance of the courtroom versus the possession. And I think even in the courtroom scenes, there's a lot of flashbacks that go back and they show the slow progress of her possession getting worse and worse, starting in college before she even got home. Once the trial starts, that's when we meet Erin Bruner, who is the lawyer who's representing the priest that's on trial. She's kind of reluctant to take the case because she's really not religious. I believe she was atheist, and the only reason she takes this case is because it could elevate her to becoming partner at her law firm. But as we see the trial go on, and we see the testimonies from different people coming in. It's very medical versus spiritual, and she kind of takes a turn, and she starts believing more and more in this possession process that probably is what killed Emily. And then we have the prosecution. So the prosecution is really pushing that this was all medical. So they bring in doctors and medical professionals. So when the prosecution steps in, they're really pushing that it was medical. It was epilepsy. It was all kinds of medical issues that Emily had that got ignored when they explored the possession angle and decided to go for an exorcism and kind of stopped her medical treatment. And that is their big case against the priest. And you see this really kind of intense battle in court, back and forth between, both sides. By the end of the trial, it does kind of work out in a little bit of an odd way, but it is kind of a satisfying end to the trial because you almost get satisfaction from both sides of the fence. So I feel like the trial wrapped up pretty well, and it closes out the court case in, I think, a very satisfying way. Now, getting into what I really like about this movie, the overall storyline. It's based on a true story. These events took place with a young girl, I believe, from Minnesota, and they just turned this into a film, kind of detailing the story of what happened to this poor girl. The cinematography in this movie is fantastic. You get a lot of just really kind of eerie mood and atmosphere all throughout the movie, and it really sets the tone for what you're seeing happen on screen. The sound design is fantastic. You get your jump scares, but they're not the cheap jump scares. It's really, really well done. You kind of get immersed in the sound, and it kind of adds to the overall atmosphere of the entire film. Overall, like I said earlier, the balance of the courtroom drama with the demonic possession, there are two things that should not work, and they are put together so well that the overall balance of the film is done, like I said, to near perfection. This is one of my favorite demonic possession movies that exists. I highly recommend it to anybody who's into any kind of courtroom drama or demonic possession movie. These two things pair together so well that you just have to see this movie. Once again, thank you for checking this video out. If you like what you see here, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And of course, as always, don't forget, watch more movies.